topic which I am going to talk, whether you are a physician, surgeon, whatever branch you are dealing with, you are going to be a patient of sepsis. The sepsis is actually a syndrome of physiological, pathological and biochemical abnormalities which are induced by infection. So sepsis is basically a host response, how you behave with infection. Somebody may get a viral fever, somebody may just get a sore throat, and the other person can get an ARDS and land in the hospital. It's all dependent on the host response. The sepsis, people have been using very loosely this word. Previously they used to define it based on whether the person has SARS. If he had infection with SARS, they used to call it sepsis. If it was associated with organ dysfunction, they used to call it severe sepsis. So people were loosely using these terms. Last 2 years, the sepsis definition has been revised. So when you use label a sepsis, you should only label a patient suffering from sepsis if he has a life-threatening organ dysfunction due to dysregulated host response to infection. And how do you quantify it? If a person has the SOFA score, which they designed as a measure to find out the organ dysfunction. If the SOFA is more than 2, because the person who has a SOFA more than 2, there is a mortality risk of 10%. And how to find out SOFA? This is available on the net based on the coagulation profile, PF ratio, the renal functions, the GCS score, renal creatinine. You can find out the SOFA score. And more than 2, that means the person, if due to infection, he has sepsis. And you require at least 4 investigations before labeling a patient that patient is suffering from sepsis. One is the arterial blood gases, other is the platelet count, and the other is serum bilirubin and serum creatinine. These are the 4 tests minimum required when you want to quantify the organ dysfunction. Now, when you are in the ward, you may not have the availability of these tests. So how to find out that the person has infection? So my time is actually going to start now.
Yeah, they got a bonus.
Yeah. So when a person is in the ward, how to find out the person who are going to have a likely higher stay in the hospital ICU? So they devised what is called the Q-SOFA, which doesn't require any investigation. So if a person has more than 2 of these, like you're taking a round in the ward, patient is admitted, or any other patient who is presented to you in the emergency, if he has a hypotension less than 100, systolic altered mental status, or his respiratory rate is more than 22. If any of these 2 are present, then there's a likelihood, if person has infection, that he is suffering from sepsis. So, and then this person must be investigated to diagnose the person has sepsis or not. You don't require any laboratory test for Q-SOFA. And when do you say patient has a septic shock? Now, a patient of sepsis can have a hypotension. That you just label it sepsis-induced hypotension. If you give a liter of fluid to this individual and the BP becomes normal, you don't label it septic shock. If person blood pressure remains hypotensive, patient blood pressure, systolic blood pressure remains below 90 or the mean arterial pressure below 65 and he requires vasopressors, then you say septic shock. And the other thing which has been added is the person lactate more than 2. If these 2 things are there, only then you label septic shock. It's extremely important now because of medico-legal reason to label sepsis and septic shock. The moment you say the patient has septic shock, he has a risk of 40% risk of mortality. So just to summarize, patient with suspected infection, so you do a Q-SOFA. If it is more than 2, then you do the test. If the SOFA score is more than 2, patient has sepsis. If he has a blood pressure which is not responding to fluid and he requires vasopressors and lactate is more than 2, you label that person as septic shock. So, and there is no word like severe sepsis. The severe sepsis word has been deleted. Sepsis and septic shock. Otherwise, a person has just infection. Now, how to manage these patients? Every 2 years, the Surviving Sepsis campaign, they come out with guidelines. And most of the world is following these guidelines. So So I'll just take you quickly through these guidelines, which are now well known to most of the people. So I'll just quickly, one by one, we'll go through this. So first is the initial resuscitation. After you've taken care of the airways, if patient has a lot of altered sensorium, requires intubation or requires airway support, then side by side you start 30 ml per kg crystalloids. Normal saline is a fluid of choice, and you can give this 30 ml per kg over a period of 3 hours. All patients who present with sepsis-induced hypotension. And this is the algorithm which has been suggested, because a lot of patients you will think may have ESRD, end-stage renal disease, or patient has a congestive heart failure, and you're scared to give fluid. So how to go about it? If person doesn't require oxygen, doesn't have a known end-stage renal disease, and is not on dialysis, not congestive heart failure, you can give 30 ml per kg. Most 99% of the patient will not have a problem. Suppose he had got ESRD or is on hemodialysis or congestive heart failure, you still give 30 ml. Most of the patients, they will in septic shock will still take 30 ml, but you reassess after giving every 300, 400, reassess that oxygenation is, the patient is not becoming overloaded with the fluid. And then if patient has pneumonia with acute lung injury, if he is intubated, you can easily give 30 ml per without any problem. If he is not intubated, then again you give the fluid after reassessing at every aliquots of 300, 400, reassess, and there are no creps, there is no oxygenation is affected, and patient is not becoming overloaded. Then, how to do reassessment is by thorough clinical examination, see the heart rate, see the blood pressure, arterial oxygen saturation. If it is falling, that means patient is probably leaking the fluid into the lung and he is becoming overloaded. Respiratory rate, is it becoming high, urine output and others, they can help you in reassessment of these patients. And you should target a mean arterial pressure of 65. If it is 90 by 70, there is no need to hurry. Mean 65 is passing a bit of urine, 0.5 ml per kg of urine, that is good enough. You need not just pump in fluid because the BP is appearing less than 90. 65 mean should be your aim in these patients. And there are trials which have shown there is no advantage of maintaining a higher blood pressure in these. And of course, you should try to normalize lactate. If you are resuscitating your patient well, the lactate will come down. That shows that whatever you're doing to your sepsis patient, he is getting better. Then you should make a diagnosis. This is the initial assessment. Send the sample for microbiological, and always you should send 2 sets of blood culture, because blood culture comes positive, you are quite sure you can de-escalate antibiotics very easily in these patients. And whatever imaging is required, you should do it, but always see that risk versus benefit. You are a big doctor in Apollo, that doesn't mean that you need to get a CT, MRI. See what is the risk and what is the benefit. Then only you send the patient, because every shifting to the imaging and other things, if it is not required, there is always a risk to these individuals. So you should only do if they are really helpful in the diagnosis of that patient. And you should start antimicrobial based on what is the anatomical site, what is the likely organism, whether it is a community-acquired sepsis or a nosocomial, and the pharmacokinetics of that, whether the drug is penetrating, you should choose your antibiotics. You could choose an antibiotic combination in the initial part, but once your culture becomes available, you must de-escalate. And you should be in a hurry. If you audit that when was the first dose of antibiotic was given when the patient arrived in the emergency, you will find it took 4 hours. Patient got admitted, it went to pharmacy brought down. So there's a lot of gap. Now most of the good places, 1 dose of IV antibiotics is available, like in our hospital. The first dose is given as early as possible, and every hour of delay increases mortality. Once patient is in the hospital, the drug should be given as early as possible. And as I said, you should de-escalate when the culture results are available. And for how long to give? Most of the duration of antibiotics is about 7 to 10 days. Except for very few, like where the drug is not penetrating, like empyema, lung abscess, in patients of undrainable foci of infections, and there are very, very few indications where you have to give a prolonged antibiotics. Most of the time it is about 7 to 10 days, even if whatever is the pneumonia. Because the other thing which we noticed is that what people do, because the X-ray is showing some shadow, the antibiotic continues. 7 to 10 days, if your patient is all right, even if there is a big shadow, please stop. This shadow is going to disappear. Then procalcitonin level. This is a new test which has come and people use it to start antibiotic. It's clearly suggested this is not a test to start antibiotics. If you feel that probably you started antibiotic, a patient doesn't have infection and procalcitonin is negative, you can stop antibiotic. And this is a test to stop antibiotic, to discontinue antibiotic, not to start. There is no study to show that procalcitonin can be used to start antibiotics in patient of sepsis. And then the source control. If person is carrying an abscess, person is carrying a dead tissue, a gangrene, a foci of infection, an empyema, you must train it. The source control, if there's a device which could be infected, so you should remove the device. So source control is another very important aspect of infection control in the patient of sepsis. Then fluid therapy, once you have initially resuscitated. As I said, crystallized is a choice, but how to give fluid is really a great topic, and still it has not been sorted out. But there are ways. People used to use CVP. No longer CVP is used as a measure to give fluid, because high CVP patient could be hypovolemic and patient with a low CVP could also be hypervolemic. So CVP is not used. There are now various measures which we use, which are called the dynamic variables, like the pulse pressure variation and these stroke volume variation to give fluids into these, or the other which is usually used, a clinical, what is called the fluid challenge, that you give fluid about 300, 400 ml and then see the response, whether the heart rate is coming down or not, whether it is improving the hemodynamic parameters and patient is not becoming overloaded. This is another technique which is called the fluid challenge, that you decide about a 300 ml of fluid and then give it and decide whether patient requires more fluids or not. Albumin could be given as an initial part when you are resuscitating, but otherwise albumin has no role in the management of sepsis and septic shock. Norepinephrine is the drug of choice for management of these. No longer dopamine. Dopamine has been associated with increased mortality in sepsis. So norepinephrine, if you require very high doses of norepinephrine, then you add vasopressin in a fixed dose of 0.03 unit per minute to decrease the norepinephrine use. How much norepinephrine can be given? You can go up to 90 microgram per minute. That is the height. If you achieve with this, then you reduce and supplement some part of this with the vasopressin in these patients. Do not use IV hydrocortisone. Only in patients who require vasopressors and they are not able to control the blood pressure, only you use in those patients hydrocortisone 100 milligram 8 hourly or 50 milligram 6 hourly. Otherwise, patient whose blood pressure is controlled with fluids and vasopressors, please don't use steroids, and they have not been shown to decrease mortality. And give blood only if the hemoglobin is less than 7, except in a cardiac patient, severe ARDS or acute hemorrhage and a congenital heart disease. Otherwise, 7 gram of hemoglobin is good enough. Fresh frozen plasma, do not use it to correct the abnormality like PT is high. It is only given if patient is bleeding or the patient, you are going to do a procedure, only then you give a fresh frozen plasma. Otherwise, you don't give fresh frozen plasma because INR is 5. There's no need to give it in a patient of sepsis. If you are planning a procedure or patient is bleeding, only then you give it. Then similarly for platelets, less than 10,000, you always give it. 20,000 if person has a risk of bleeding, and more than 50,000 is required for any procedure, and 70,000 for major surgery. That's the usual way we follow. Don't give immunoglobulin, it's a wastage of money. And mechanical ventilation should be done as per the low tidal volume strategy, which is the usual standard strategy for managing ARDS patient. Don't try to maintain a very strict sugar control, because hypoglycemia, a lot of people have died, even if you are doing 1 hourly. So 140 to 180 milligram percent is the range in a sepsis patient when you're managing these patients. Whether you use continuous or intermittent renal dialysis, both are equally good. All patients should receive venous thromboprophylaxis. If he requires admission for more than 3 days, he should be on some form of low molecular weight heparin, because the risk of pulmonary embolism is very high and the mortality could be there. And a lot of patients die because they were not on these. Then the thromboprophylaxis only if there is a high risk of bleeding. Otherwise, routine the stress ulcer prophylaxis is really not recommended. Then towards the end, I would say you should not do because you can do it. You should only do if it saves the patient. Lot of corporates, they keep on supplying money to the hospitals and they keep on doing, knowing fully well the person can't survive. What I'm trying to say is we should have the target. 90% of the death in the ICU in US, they are by withholding and withdrawing support. Because nowadays, whatever you keep on doing, it prolongs the inevitable. You know this patient is not going to survive, but a lot of things are just pumped into, now let's put a filter, let's put this, and knowing fully well, he's an 80-year-old gentleman, had multiple comorbidities, is a father of a person who can afford. It is our duty to explain to the relatives, explain that we should know when to stop the treatment in a patient of sepsis, because not only drains the money, it also involves a bed which could be given to a patient who could probably survive. Thank you very much.